Joining us now is Yehuda Shaffer, former Deputy State Attorney of Israel. And Yehuda, let's just start with incitement. Legally, what is it?
Well, we have a crime in our criminal code, section Article 144 D, which says that if you if you incite speech related to promoting or calling for violence against a person, you are committing a crime of 5 years. Now, this is a very, very sensitive crime in Israel. You cannot indict without the personal authorization of the Attorney General, and there's a whole procedure to allow the police even to investigate this. I used to, as Deputy State Attorney, I used to give these authorizations because this is a free speech crime, a crime infringing on free speech, and it's dealt with very, very stringently by the court. The court said that if there's no, we have a similar test like the clear and present danger test. It's worded a little differently. You have to show that there's probable and realistic consequences that will happen. So if I called for violence and nobody's going to actually do anything about it, this is not incitement. If Sheikh Raed Salah, for instance, was just convicted last week, I think, on appeal.
A senior Islamic extremist leader
who called for, was inciting for terror, was commencing a terror attack, etc. That was considered because of his because he was a public figure and because he was influencing people. Then because he was an influential person, this would be considered incitement. So it's a very, very difficult crime in our criminal code, and it's interpreted very narrowly. And there's only a handful of cases of people indicted for incitement.
Not indicted, but today Yair Netanyahu, talk about freedom of speech. He would argue freedom of speech, but a judge issued a restraining order against Yair Netanyahu, preventing him from tweeting or social media posts about the leaders of the protest movement. Why? Was he inciting?
No, I don't think anybody thinks he was inciting, and he won't be investigated for incitement. We have a separate law, another law, additional law, not the criminal code, which is about harassment. It's about when you harass someone. Then the lower court may issue an injunction to stop your harassment invading the privacy or the peaceful, the right of someone to live peacefully in his house, etc. And what happened here was that Yair Netanyahu took private information of addresses, ID numbers, etc., posted them and tweeted them, and called for people to harass these people, these organizers of the protest. Now, what happened after on the tweet, and this came up in the court discussion today in court, was that several people began retweeting, yeah, let's go and beat them up, let's go and be violent against them, etc. And the court asked Netanyahu, why were you indifferent? Netanyahu did not appear in the court, but his lawyer did. Right. And the judge was really pressing and asking, why didn't you? Why were you indifferent to this? Once you saw this was turning into something violent, why were you indifferent? And the judge did not. She did not get good answers to the questions, and therefore she issued the injunction for 6 months. And he is not allowed. He erased the tweet this evening,
and he is no longer.
And he's not allowed to retweet. Right. Now to do this again.
So I just clarify. It was not incitement, but harassment.
Exactly.
That was the basis.
And there's some very interesting things come out of this decision. For instance, the court is saying to us that these people are not public figures, these organizers of the protest. Whereas a public figure like Netanyahu, you're allowed to protest in front of their house, but calling for protesting in front of just protest organizers just to harass them is not legal. That's harassment.
So if it had been other politicians,
maybe,
then it might have been legal.
Well, not even that. I don't think the court allows demonstrations in front of private houses as a general rule. The Prime Minister is an exception. The Attorney General, an exception was made in Petah Tikva. These are very rare cases where the court allows harassing public figures in front of their homes.
I do want to move on to this other case where a gentleman posted a photo, we showed it, of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Obviously, the context is kind of made it was like looking like a Nazi salute, but it was not doctored. That was just a news photo that appeared. He posted it, didn't make any reference in the post to Germany or Nazis, and that the police made him take it down.
I find that very surprising. I don't know who authorized that. As I told you, there are procedures. The police is not allowed to begin an investigation on incitement without prior authorization by the Deputy State Attorney, and then the indictment itself has to be signed by the Attorney General. So Israel is very cautious and very careful about limiting free speech through criminal code use. And in this case, the police, I think, maybe overdid I cannot see in this picture, I cannot see the necessary elements of incitement. Nobody's calling for violence. There's no real probability that anybody will be violent because of this. This is poor taste criticism of the Prime Minister.
I should note the police put out a statement while defending the officer who went there and made that request, say they are looking deeper, they are investigating the incident. Let's take just a more general look at the tone of the debate, which Prime Minister Netanyahu referred to, about the danger of, is this something the justice system can handle? What's happening now in Israeli society?
Well, I can feel for Mr. Netanyahu not being Prime Minister not being happy with all this, but this is a democracy. There's no way the court is going to limit free speech in Israel. People are allowed to protest. The press might not be. Netanyahu might be right that the press maybe is not being objective here, but even that is not a reason for investigating or indicting anybody for any misconduct. This is just part of the democratic game. Netanyahu is allowed to criticize, to put out his own criticism, but I don't think the use of the criminal code here for incitement is the right tool. What the court did today was an excellent move because using this tool of preventing harassment of people who are organizing protest is extremely important, because this is sending a message that the court will protect demonstrators and will not allow them to be harassed in front of their own homes. So,
well, to clarify, so that you're talking about the decision by the court against Yair Netanyahu.
Yes.
I want to again stress it was not a criminal ruling against Yair Netanyahu.
No, not at all.
But it was on the harassment.
Yes.
6 months though, not posting. That's a little unusual.
No, it's not. It's not harassing these specific people that are the protest organizers. That they now enjoy the protection of the court, and the reason that they enjoy the protection of the court is what I talked about before, is that the court saw that following this tweet of Yair Netanyahu, there was calls for violence, and Netanyahu was indifferent to this, which creates a harassment atmosphere, against these people, and nobody should be harassed just for organizing protests in a democratic society. So the court is defending the right to protest.
On the stand. Obviously, Yair Netanyahu, I imagine, feels differently.
I'm sure.
Yehuda Shaffer, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
On The Rundown.